She sat at the back of the room, quiet and unnoticed. Her overalls were smudged with oil, her boots worn from years on the floor. While the engineers and executives filled the conference hall in suits and silk ties, she clutched her notepad, head lowered, listening. The engine on the screen in front of them, the company's pride, had failed. Not once, not twice, but repeatedly. And no one had an answer. For months, top engineers from around the world had tried to fix it. Millions had been poured into the project, but the machine still refused to run. And now, the CEO had grown tired of experts with excuses. He stepped forward, tall and confident, and looked across the room. Anyone here, anyone who thinks, "They can fix this, I dare you." The room stayed silent, eyes lowered, hands remained still. No one moved. But then she stood. All heads turned. Her voice was steady, even though her hands were trembling. "I think I can fix it." A few engineers chuckled. Others raised eyebrows. Whispers ran through the room. The CEO squinted at her. "You think you can fix the engine?" His tone wasn't angry, just amused. "You're a what? A floor tech? Assistant?" She nodded. "I've worked in this factory for 9 years. I know the machines better than anyone." Someone from the crowd muttered, "She probably means the vending machines." But she didn't respond to the laughter. She simply stepped forward, her calm face hiding a lifetime of being underestimated. The CEO folded his arms. "All right, you've got 1 shot, 1 hour, fix it." The room didn't clear. Instead, it grew more crowded. Phones came out. People leaned against walls, waiting to see her fail. Even the project head, who had flown in from another country, stood nearby. With his arms crossed, smirking, she was escorted to the engine room. The large machine stood still like a stubborn beast. Wires everywhere. Lights dead. Its hum had vanished weeks ago. Experts had taken it apart and rebuilt it over and over. But it still refused to work. She took off her gloves. Her fingers traced the metal. Her ears listened for something no one else heard. As the hour ticked down, she asked for no help. She didn't even ask for tools. Just silence. Outside the room, people whispered, "This is embarrassing. She's going to break it more. Wait till the CEO sees this disaster." But inside, she worked quietly. Her hands moved with confidence, her eyes focused, and her mind. Her mind wasn't just remembering what manuals said. It remembered sounds, smells, vibrations, all the things that machines gave off when something was just slightly wrong. She reached under one of the control units and opened a small panel, one most engineers hadn't even noticed. Hidden inside was a tiny, misaligned connector, not broken, just off by a hair's width. She fixed it, adjusted one valve, tightened a bolt. Then she stepped back. "Try it now," she called out. The head of operations scoffed. "That's it?" She touched 3 things. Still, they flipped the main switch. A hum, then a soft vibration, and then, like thunder rolling in from far away, the engine roared to life. Smooth, even, alive. Gasps filled the room. The CEO stared at the controls, the monitors. Everything was green, no errors, no warnings. He slowly looked up at her through the glass. She didn't smile. She just wiped her, hands on a rag, and stepped out. "How?" someone whispered. The project head asked. "What did she do?" The CEO walked over, his voice low. "You fixed what no one else could. What's your name?" She simply said, "I just paid attention." The room stayed quiet. For the first time, no one laughed. The room was still echoing with the engine's hum when she walked back to her seat. People didn't know whether to clap or stay quiet. Some looked confused, others curious. But one thing was clear. No one was laughing anymore. The CEO didn't leave the room. He stood in place watching her, his face unreadable. A few executives tried to catch his attention, whispering updates, asking what to do next. He didn't answer them. Instead, he walked over to her. "Come with me," he said. She hesitated. Not because she was afraid, but because she had never been invited. Not to the top floor. Not by someone wearing polished shoes and a gold watch. They entered a sleek office, high above the factory. Everything was glass, metal, and expensive. Silence. She stood near the door, feeling out of place with her old boots and grease-stained overalls. He gestured toward a chair. Sit. She stayed standing. Was that luck? He asked her. Or do you really know these machines better than my top engineers? She replied softly. It's not about knowing more, it's about noticing what others ignore. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. I've had 4 teams from 4 countries come to fix that engine. Spent millions. Your fix took 20 minutes. She stayed quiet. He tapped the table once, slowly. Tell me everything. She took a breath, and for the first time, someone listened. She told him how she had watched that engine from day one. Not with a degree, but with patience. She heard its sounds shift before others did, saw the tiniest pattern change in its readouts. She explained how one faulty connector, just a hair out of place, had been missed by experts because they were chasing complicated answers. They looked at the problem like a puzzle, she said. I looked at it like a living thing. He nodded. Slowly. Later that afternoon, word began to spread, not through memos or meetings, but through whispers. People from the upper offices came downstairs asking, Who is she? Workers on the factory floor stood taller when they saw her pass. By the next morning, it wasn't just whispers. A photo of the engine running again had made it to the internal news board. Right beside it, her name. The title read, The Woman Who Fixed What No One Could. Some people were proud, some were jealous, but all were curious. She was called to speak to another department, then another. Invitations kept coming. Tell us how you noticed what no one else did. Can you look at this unit next? Can you help train our teams? Her answer was always the same. I'll help, but I won't pretend to know everything. And yet everything she touched seemed to work better after she walked away. Then came the surprise. The CEO returned to the factory floor, not with cameras or speeches, but with a single letter in his hand. He called her over privately and said, I want you to take a new position, lead technician, same team, but now you're in charge. She blinked. Me? Yes. You. I never went to a big school. I don't have fancy training. You have something better. You have instinct. You listen, you see what others miss. She held the letter in her hand, staring at it. She had worked this job for 9 years, cleaned spills, fixed belts, stayed after hours. No one had ever asked her opinion, until now. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just nodded once and said, All right. It started with a small article in the company newsletter, just a few sentences praising her unexpected success. But within a week, that story grew legs. First came a local blogger, curious about the woman who fixed the impossible engine. Then a journalist from a regional tech magazine asked for an interview. She said no to all of them. She didn't want to be a story. She just wanted to work. But stories don't always wait for permission. Her co-workers treated her differently. Now, some smiled more, some kept their distance. A few tried to befriend her overnight. Others whispered when she passed by. She still wore the same uniform, still took the same lunch, still used the old locker with a broken latch, but now her every step was watched. The CEO called again. This time it wasn't to fix an engine. I want you to sit in on tomorrow's design meeting, he said. She looked up. Design? Yes. New engine model. I want your input. She hesitated. But I'm not an engineer. You're not, he agreed. But you fixed what they couldn't. That matters more right now. The next day she entered the meeting room wearing her usual uniform. Around the long table sat people in suits with thick reports and glowing tablets. Some barely looked up as she walked in. Others raised eyebrows. The lead engineer glanced at her. You're here for... She's here for the engine, the CEO said simply. For the first 10 minutes, no one spoke to her directly. Charts were presented. Concepts thrown around. Fancy words filled the air. She listened quietly. Then they began debating a heat flow issue, something they hadn't solved for weeks. One of the engineers pointed at the diagram. The system won't balance out. We've tested 3 redesigns. Another added, we may need to start from scratch. She leaned forward quietly. What if the airflow vent is positioned too early in the cycle? The room paused. What? She repeated. If the vent is that early, it loses pressure before heat can stabilize. It'll always overcool too fast. Someone chuckled under their breath. That's not how it works. But the lead engineer frowned. Wait a second. He adjusted the model, moved one part, reran a simulation, and the numbers changed, sharply, for the better. Silence. The CEO smiled. Looks like it's working now. She didn't smile back. She just shrugged. It made sense in my head. After the meeting, the lead engineer approached her. I've been trying to fix that problem for 2 weeks, he admitted. You solved it in 2 sentences. She looked down. I just saw something no one else did. Back on the floor, the workers cheered when they heard. But she didn't act like a hero. She went back to work, replaced a fuse, tightened a gear, ate her lunch quietly. But deep down, she felt something new. Not pride, not power, but purpose. She was being heard, truly heard. And that changed everything. By the end of that week, her name wasn't just on the factory board. It was in inboxes, on podcasts, even mentioned in a short clip on the morning news. The story had spread. Ordinary factory worker stuns engineers, fixes impossible, engine. But she didn't feel like anything had changed. She still took the same bus, still helped sweep near her station before shifts, still ate the same homemade lunch from a reused container. But around her, the world had started shifting. People stared longer. Strangers nodded respectfully. Younger workers asked quiet questions, hoping to learn. And then the calls came. The front desk lady approached her one morning. You've got mail, she said, smiling. A lot of it. Letters, invitations, interview requests, job offers from places she'd never even heard of. Companies with big logos, names she'd seen only on TV. One envelope bore the name of a massive tech firm from another country. The offer inside was generous, too generous. She set it aside. Later that day, the CEO approached her again, this time with 2 people beside him. One was from public relations, the other from legal. We want to make sure you're protected, he told her. Protected? Your idea, your instinct, your contribution. It matters now. People want to claim it, twist it, profit from it. She blinked. But I didn't do it for attention. He nodded. I know. That's what makes this harder. The PR person leaned in. With your permission, we'd like to make your story part of the company's official history. A feature, maybe even a short documentary, just share your truth. She looked down at her hands worn from work, rough from years of tightening bolts and replacing wires. I don't want cameras, she said quietly. But I want the truth told, the real truth. The CEO nodded. Then we'll do it your way. Later that evening, she sat at home looking at the stack of letters again. Her neighbors had heard too. One even brought over a home-cooked pie. We're proud of you, the woman had whispered. For the first time in years, she sat back and thought maybe this is what being seen feels like. But with attention came pressure. At work, more people started asking her for answers. On things she hadn't seen, topics she hadn't studied. When she said she didn't know, some looked disappointed. Some even whispered, I thought she was supposed to be a genius. And that stung. She never claimed to be a genius. She just listened to machines, to patterns, to problems. But now people expected her to always have a miracle ready. It made her chest feel tight. That night, she stayed late. The factory was quiet, just the hum of machines and her own thoughts. She walked. Past the old engine, the one that had changed everything. She placed her hand on it gently. It was warm, alive, still running smooth, and she whispered to herself, "I'm not magic. I just care." But outside those factory walls, headlines were forming again. The fixer of the future. From floor worker to industry icon. Who is she really? She didn't know how to answer that question yet. But she knew one thing. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted to be useful. She didn't ask for attention. But now, it followed her everywhere. On her way to work, someone snapped a photo. At lunch, a stranger approached with a smile and a phone camera. Even her old school reached out, asking if she'd speak at their next assembly, but all she wanted was space to breathe. Back at the factory, her usual rhythm was changing. She used to work quietly in the corners, replacing parts, checking gauges, helping others when needed. Now every move she made came with eyes watching. One day during a break, two men she didn't recognize walked up to her on the floor. Their suits were expensive, their shoes shiny. "You're the woman who fixed the system, right?" one said, not waiting for her name. "We'd like to take you out to lunch," the other added. "Big things are happening in your field. We'd love to show you what we're building." She paused. "I'm on shift. We'll take care of that." They smiled. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned to clean her hands. When she looked back, they were already speaking to her supervisor. That made her stomach tighten. After work, she sat on the bus, the city, lights flashing against the window. In her lap were 3 more offers, all promising more money than she'd ever seen in her life. Relocation, travel, even TV appearances. And yet, something didn't sit right. At home, her niece asked her, "Are you going to be rich now?" She smiled gently. "Maybe. But being rich doesn't always mean you're happy." The next morning, things grew colder at work. Some of her co-workers had started avoiding her. Others spoke in low voices when she entered the room. One even moved his chair without looking at her. She wasn't sure why, until she overheard someone mutter, "She fixed one thing. Now she thinks she's the boss." It hurt, not because she cared about their approval, but because they didn't understand. She never asked for any of this. She wasn't chasing titles. She was just doing her job with heart. Still, the attention grew. The CEO called her to his office again. "I heard some of the team is acting differently," he said. She nodded. "I want you to know, none of this is your fault," he continued. "In fact, I was thinking, if you're open to it, I'd like you to train others, build a program, teach the next generation of tech workers. Your way." She paused. "Me? Teach? You have something. We can't teach in books. You feel the work. You listen to what's not being said." It was a big step, a permanent one. That night, she sat on her couch with a cup of tea, her boots still by the door. Her phone kept buzzing. Emails, interviews, all waiting. But she thought about the younger ones on the factory floor, the quiet ones, the overlooked. The ones with ideas no one asked to hear. If she could lift even one of them into the light like someone finally did for her, it might all be worth it. She clicked open her email. Not the job offers, not the TV deals. The one from the factory, training center. She began to write back, "Yes, I'm ready to teach, but not to show off. To help others believe they matter too." She stood in front of the room, holding a plain marker in one hand and a worn cloth in the other. Around her, the training hall buzzed with low voices, young technicians, fresh workers, even a few skeptical veterans. All gathered to learn from her. But when she turned to the board, her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "I'm not here to impress you," she began, "and I won't waste time with big speeches. But I will show you how to hear what machines don't say out loud." Some leaned forward, others crossed their arms. She expected that. People often listened only once you proved you were worth hearing. She didn't tell them how smart she was. She showed them with grease under her nails, knowledge in her fingertips, and the way her eyes never missed a wire out of place. Every lesson came with stories, Not theories, but real shifts, real problems, and how she solved them using more than just tools. But as her training program grew, so did the tension. Some in management began whispering about her rising influence. A few mid-level supervisors, unused to sharing the spotlight, started pushing back. One even removed her name from a report she helped write. Another reassigned one of her new trainees without asking her. Then came the unexpected. A notice was taped near her locker. Some people fix engines, others just break teams. She stared at it for a long minute. Not because she was hurt, but because it confirmed what she feared. Someone didn't want her there. The CEO heard about it later. That day, he called her in. "I won't let this place turn its back on you," he said firmly. "Tell me who's behind this." She shook her head. "I don't want anyone fired," he frowned. "But they're trying to push you out." "No," she said. "They're scared. And when people are scared, they don't see clearly." He leaned back. "So what do you want?" She thought for a moment. "Let me finish the program. Let them see results. Then decide who belongs." Over the next weeks, her trainees, once quiet and overlooked, started fixing breakdowns faster than senior staff. They noticed early warnings. Others ignored. They communicated better. They listened deeper. One day, the same supervisor who once rolled his eyes during her training watched a young woman from her class solve a turbine jam in 5 minutes flat. He didn't say a word. But the next day he showed up quietly during training, sat in the back, and listened. One by one, others followed. Not because she demanded it, because her work spoke louder than titles ever could, and the message was clear. You didn't need to shine to lead. You just needed to show up, every day, and never stop caring. They wanted her on stage, a major tech summit. Hundreds of guests, executives, investors, government partners, even media. And at the top of the agenda, one unexpected name. Hers. At first, she said no. She wasn't a speaker. She wasn't polished. She didn't wear heels or talk in buzzwords. She wasn't like them, but the CEO asked personally. "They've heard your story," he said. "Now they want to hear you." So she agreed. They gave her a dress, new shoes, even a stylist. She politely said no to most of it and wore what made her feel like herself. Dark slacks, clean boots, and the same simple blouse she wore when she fixed that impossible engine. Backstage, someone handed her a speech written by the PR team. It was filled with words she never used and praises that made her uncomfortable. She folded it slowly, put it in her pocket, and walked out with nothing in her hands but her story. The lights were bright, the room silent, cameras pointed, every eye focused on the woman from the factory floor. She took a breath. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she said plainly. "At least that's what I used to believe." A pause. "I was hired to clean, carry, assist, not to speak, not to lead, not to fix the things that experts said couldn't be fixed." She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. "But one day I heard something in a broken machine that others didn't. Not because I was smarter, not because I had a fancy title, but because I listened. I cared. I stayed when others walked away." The crowd leaned in. Since then, I've been called a genius, a hero, a symbol. But I'm none of those things. I'm a worker, a woman who sees value in the unnoticed. And I'm not special. There are many like me, if you just bother to look. Some in the audience lowered their heads. Others sat still, listening deeply. She continued, "We need fewer titles and more trust. Fewer meetings and more listening. Talent isn't always loud. It's often quiet, covered in grease, showing up early and staying late." A ripple of emotion moved through the room. "I didn't come here to impress you. I came here to remind you. Value doesn't come from where someone sits, it comes from what they give every day." She stepped back. No applause cue, no practiced bow. But then, the crowd rose, slowly, honestly, clapping not because they were told to, but because they understood. Backstage, a woman from another company stopped her. "You said what I've wanted to say for years," she whispered. Later, at a reception, a man in a perfect suit approached. "We'd like to offer you a position in global development," he said. "You'd travel, speak, represent change." She looked around the polished room, looked down at her clean boots, then smiled politely. "I'll think about it," she said. But deep down she already knew her story wasn't meant to be told from a stage. It belonged on the floor, in the lab, with the ones who felt unseen, until a week's passed since the summit. Her face had been on magazines, blogs, even a short video that went viral. The woman who fixed the impossible engine. The soft-spoken factory worker who stunned the tech world with a speech no one saw coming. But she never changed her phone number, never hired an assistant, never moved from her modest apartment, with the loose kitchen drawer and the cracked front step. And every morning she still rode the same bus. People kept asking what was next. "Are you taking the offer from overseas? Will you run your own company now? Are you publishing a book?" She smiled each time and said nothing. But quietly, behind the scenes, she'd been working on something of her own. One morning, she called a meeting, not for executives, not for media, but for the people she used to eat lunch beside, the floor workers, the janitors. The quiet ones with smart eyes but no degrees. They gathered in a dusty corner of the building where old tools and chairs were kept. She stood on a wooden crate and said, "I turned down every offer." A pause. Someone whispered, "Why?" "Because we don't need to leave to be powerful," she said. "We need to grow where we are." She unrolled a poster and pinned it to the wall. The Listening Lab, a free learning space for factory workers, run by workers, built for workers. This is for anyone who's been told they're just something. Just a cleaner. Just a floor hand. Just a temp. The room was still. "I want to help us teach each other. Share what we know. Build confidence. Build skills. No exams, no judgment. Just learning and respect." One young man raised his hand. "But who's funding this?" She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. A check. "It's funded by the bonus I was given. I told the CEO I don't want a new title, I want a new culture, and he agreed." Gasps, smiles, a few teary eyes. Word spread faster than she expected, not to the press, but through hands, hearts, and whispers. Within 2 months, the Listening Lab had 40 regulars. Within 6, it was expanded to 3 branches. Some who joined couldn't read blueprints. Now they ran diagnostics better than anyone. Some had been passed over for years. Now they led safety teams, redesign projects, repair squads. She never asked for praise. She kept her own name small and made the space big. One day, the CEO walked in, watching a group learn to recalibrate a cooling unit. He turned to her and asked, "Do you realize what you've built?" She replied softly, "Not a lab, not a program. A place where being seen doesn't depend on your badge." And just like that, she walked past him, to fix a loose panel with one of her trainees, laughing as they worked. She hadn't become a star. She'd become something better. Light that helped others shine.